Hey, it's good having you back in it.
It's nice to be
It's
back,
nice
Scott.
to have him back.
It's nice to be back, Scott.
Go check out the podcast we did. We did some stuff across the morning. Thought we'd do a little bit of a news video / a talking point conversation thing on the PlayStation VR 2 because we're about to hit a year since the PSVR 2 launched in 2022. Now, I thought it was a bit of a talking point that not once have Sony convinced me to get the damn thing. Versus JP Josh Brown, who has a PlayStation VR 2. It says it's very good, apparently. And I don't believe the man, so I thought we'd have a conversation on the state of things. I don't think the PSVR 2, has been a meaningful part of Sony's rollout this generation, and it should be. I feel like they had so much goodwill around the idea of VR, the idea of Spider-Man VR, what about Horizon VR?
Yeah.
And then even when people bought into Horizon Call of the Mountain, the general reception was, it's fine, it's okay. And I think if that's the bar, they've not really gone back and hit it again.
Well, the issue is, Sony as a company is great at making things. The PSVR 1, really good.
Yes.
PSVR 2, even better. The PlayStation Vita, one of your most favourite things of all time.
I love the Vita, to be fair.
The issue is, unless it's called the PlayStation 1 or it has a number after it, they're crap at selling you it. They just don't care. And I don't know why this is their issue, because they have so much potential in all of those things. They have so much potential in the PSVR 2 especially. But all of the best games that you can play on that system right now are mostly ports. You know, you've got some exclusives, the adaptations, I would describe them as, of Resident Evil 8 and Resident Evil 4. Incredible. They were, in my opinion, worth experiencing on a PSVR 2, worth going out to buy a PSVR 2, especially if you've not played the games in their base form. But, like you said, what else do they have? They had Call of the Mountain way back when, but from a first-party perspective, what do they have going forward?
Well, they didn't. They really should have led with the when Resident Evil 4 there was for the remake there was the DLC Separate Ways. It's awesome. The VR mode was added to that. RE8 and 7 obviously was a bigger deal with the VR, but Resident Evil Village has a VR mode as well. Those things don't feel like Sony get out there and say, hey, by the way, you have console available VR at that level. Like I feel like they never really mention it. Like we just did a whole podcast and we're gonna do a lot more on the state of Sony, the state of Xbox, the state of Nintendo going into 2024, and we talked quite a bit about Sony's live service plans. They seem to be falling apart with Jim Ryan stepping down, who was one of the newest CEOs. His whole push seemed to be for live service stuff, and now with him moving away, it seems like a lot of those plans are just going to be falling apart. We're still going to get Foam Stars and Helldivers too, but I'll be amazed if we get Concord and everything else. And the PSVR 2 stuff didn't come up once from either of us, and we didn't even talk about how much they had failed to factor that into their overall identity, and I think that's quite telling. But also, like, do you think there's a place for that going forward? Like, what would it even take for you? I mean, let us know what you think down in the comments below. What would it take for you to get a PSVR 2 at this point?
You know, many smarter people than I have made this criticism of VR in general, and that's that it is almost impossible to market without having hands-on experience with it. Like, it's impossible to fully translate the experience of what you're seeing in VR onto a regular flat screen trailer. Like, you can watch gameplay of something and kind of get a feel of it. But honestly, if I just showed you, say, just raw gameplay of The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners 2, which is one of my favorite VR games, you'd probably look at it and kind of go, yeah, it looks a bit mid, you know what I mean? Like, on a flat screen, it doesn't look that good. When you're there, when you're experiencing it, one of the best experiences I had all year last year.
You described holding a zombie and stabbing him in the head, and I thought that sounded pretty fun.
You've never lived. You've never felt like a psychopath unless you grabbed a zombie's head, used your hand to put a knife in its eye, and then have to wrangle it like this because it gets stuck in the viscera. That's what VR is made for. That absolutely is.
But just super quick, do you remember when Manhunt 2 was on the Wii and they were like, it's simulating picking up a toilet lid and hitting someone with it, and young me was like, I really want to do that. I really want to hit the man with a toilet lid. Like, couldn't do it.
I was absolutely just a complete tangent now. I was laughing so much at this clip that was doing the rounds. I can't remember if it was Saints and Sinners 1 or Saints and Sinners 2. And it was just this person going ham on this zombie. Like, they weren't going for the head. Like, they were just shanking this zombie like this. And I'm thinking, okay, in the wrong hands, this tech may be dangerous, but in the right hands, it's very immersive.
Yes.
But like I said, that doesn't translate over to the trailers. That genuine feeling doesn't translate over. So I do think they have an uphill battle there. But like you described, they haven't also done enough they haven't come out and gone, these are the games you need to buy this system for. There isn't a Half-Life Alyx, to put it succinctly, for the PSVR 2 yet. That is first party. I would describe there are games as good as Half-Life Alyx, if not better on the system, but not that you need to buy this piece of kit specifically for. You can buy a Quest 3 or you can buy whatever else, you know?
Which is a really good point. I mean, I'm trying to look up Sony's own sales stats on the PSVR 2. They addressed it at the start of last year. Apparently the first 6 weeks, I think, on sale, it sold higher than the PSVR 1, but only by about 8%. Apparently they had to revise their internal sales expectations. They initially thought it would sell 2 million units. It came in at about 600,000, so it was way below. They revised them to 1 million and still came underneath. And they just haven't really addressed it since then. In a way, it's like the PlayStation Portal, and the way that's kind of gone across November and December, where but even then, I still feel like they got behind that in a way that they didn't with the PSVR 2. You still get quite a lot of, or at least at the time, PS Portal adverts going, look, you can play Spider-Man in bed, or you can do these play these things on the couch. Like you said, maybe they just fall prey to the fact that you can't convince someone through a 2D graphic that this is what VR is. They did try those adverts where it was like the Iron Man goggles over the face. And it's like, maybe there's only so much you can do, but I feel like going forward, if you look at those sales numbers, I doubt that they've picked back up, otherwise Sony will be shouting about them. And I wonder how much that's part of their rollout going forward. Like, if it's not live service and it's not PSVR and they can't afford story stuff after Spider-Man 2, what the living hell are they going to do?
You're making some great points there.
Thank you.
I'm going to hopefully not ramble on too long because I want to get to them both. But what I would say initially is I think VR still is a very niche product, and that's partly because of the issues we've already talked about, but just because of the barrier for entry. Like, the PlayStation Portal might be selling better, but they might not have to put as much marketing behind that thing because it's cheaper. It's like it's a more affordable product relative to something like the PSVR 2, which on its own is going to set you back £500, and you need a PlayStation 5 to even play it. You know, like, you're looking at £1,000 more or less in terms of total investment if you don't already own that PlayStation 5, and that's a lot of money anytime, but it's especially a lot of money when this thing launched last year, when we were just starting like these cost of living crises and everyone was going through financial struggles and still are. It's an expensive bit of kit that's already niche, that's struggling to sell right now. But to your other point, which I think is great, by the way,
thank you.
Its position within Sony as a whole and PlayStation's own approach to what do they want out of the things they sell. What they want is max profit with minimum risk, and that's why we've gotten a deluge of arguably safe sequels. They've not gone mad on new IP. They've not tried to throw hundreds of $millions at like crazy, original things. They've played it safe, and I wonder whether PSVR is even capable of producing the profit that they would need to dedicate first-party studios their attention to it.
That's what's so baffling about the way that it rolled out. Like, I remember when they announced PSVR 2, and I know that there are different thoughts on this because obviously you're way more into VR than I am in general. I have a PlayStation VR, and I've played the Quest 2, the Oculus Quest, the wireless one. I've played a little bit of that. Our own editor Dan Durkin has one of them. I feel like VR never really took off, like to the degree that someone like a Sony would invest in. So when they announced PSVR 2, I was like, okay. I felt like it was going to bomb immediately because the hunger's just not there for it. And it's cool that it exists. It's cool that a new potential medium exists, and a new way to play games, a new control scheme. Like the analog sticks changed everything in regards to how we control characters. So arguably there's stuff you could do in VR that you couldn't do anywhere else. But I just feel like they've not really done anything with it. It's just sort of there if you want it. And there's just this weird sort of approach to it where they kind of just shrug whenever people bring this up in regards to what they're going to do going forward.
I thought VR generally would be more widely adopted than it is compared to 10 years ago. Like when they dropped the first PSVR, I thought, right, this is the future, and the future might be coming soon. Now I've readjusted those expectations. Like, mass VR adoption is still going to be a long ways away, but I do think we're making inroads. Like, I think just the PlayStation VR 2, with all of those caveats that I described, initially selling more than the original, which Sony, by all accounts, were quite pleased with. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it was a massive moneymaker for them, but they were impressed by the copies that they shipped and the units that they sold. I just think it's getting inroads. You know what I mean? I think if you expect VR to be this total dominant thing right now, like, the market just isn't there. But I do genuinely still think I mean, another 10 years, when people have more hands-on experience, when the games are a little bit flashier, when people kind of know what they're getting and it's more affordable, maybe then it'll become this thing that we do talk about in the same breath of their other first-party single-player releases.
That's kind of the thing. It's like, is it actually here to stay? I think from the non-VR fans' point of view, it feels like a flash in the pan that is extremely valuable if you can afford it and get stuck into it and enjoy those games the way that they play and everything. But to me, it never escaped gimmick territory, and I want it to. I want it to be this big viable thing that gets me across. I love the look of the climbing sections in Horizon Call of the Mountain.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that there was another climbing game in like 2017 or whatever for the original PSVR. Like things like that. I think they're like new ways to control games. I just wonder, like, given it another 10 years, I don't think Sony's going to be supporting it in another 10 years.
Yeah.
I think in another 10 years, you've either got the PS6 or at least you've got people there's enough PS5 saturation that maybe they've then makes the headset more affordable.
Yeah.
But it's such a weird long bet that like Sony internally are so messy in regards to what they want to put money into, and they've turned Insomniac into the Marvel studio, and like, that's their plan for the next like 5 years.
Yeah.
With X-Men and the Fantastic Four stuff. So I'm just curious. Like, I think it's an interesting talking point. Like I said, we're coming up on a year since the PSVR 2, but you'd barely know it unless we started talking about it.
I would say, you mentioned there, you're waiting for the moment where VR stops becoming a gimmick.
Yes.
I'm telling you, it's no longer a gimmick. The
Right.
PSVR 1, I thought was amazing for its price. It wasn't like the thing that would sell the random person on VR. There were too many issues with tracking,
Yes.
no thumbsticks like you mentioned. The games themselves, while there were some good ones, a lot of them felt like tech demos. Now, I think PSVR 2 has had a genuinely incredible first year in terms of the games that are available. Yes, a lot of them are ports. I'm just talking more broadly right now. I think that there are too many PSVR 2 games. I have so many that I want to get to that I just don't have the time for.
Right.
It's really frustrating. I think it's had an incredible first year, but like you, I do worry about year 2, year 3, year 4. How is Sony going to keep this momentum up? Because they're going to run out of good ports eventually. They need their own original games to sell you on this console specifically. And that's where I worry, because I thought they got off to a cracking start. Yeah, they might not have marketed as well as they could have, but now I worry about that, like you say, momentum stalling in favor of other projects or other avenues of industry growth, as they may describe it.
No, totally, and that makes me hesitant to buy in. Like, I don't feel like they're going to support it, even though I would like them to. And yeah, I guess I'm just curious what else they end up putting out, or whether they address it. Like, they'll do something for the 1 year anniversary, you would hope, in February, and then I guess we'll see what happens across the rest of 2024.